Okay, go ahead and get out your worksheets from yesterday, your 10.1 worksheets, and I'm going to show you the answers to those so you can see how you did. Number 1, your parabola would be going down. Your vertex was negative 1, 1. Axis of symmetry would be x equals negative 1. Number 2, your vertex would be negative 3, comma 2. Axis of symmetry at x equals negative 3. That parabola is opening up. Reminder, when you write your axis of symmetry, you need to be writing x equals, not just the number, x equals. Number 3, your vertex was negative 1, negative 3. Axis of symmetry, x equals negative 1. And that parabola was opening downward. Number 4, your vertex was 3, negative 3. Axis of symmetry, x equals 3. Your parabola was opening down. Number 5, your vertex was 3, comma negative 2. Axis of symmetry, x equals 3. Parabola opening down. Number 6, vertex was 1, comma negative 2. Axis of symmetry, x equals 1. Parabola opening up, like that. And those were your 6 problems for your 10.1 worksheet. So today what we're going to look at, so you should have the notes after you turned in your test, is your 10.5 part 1. The back side is going to have part 2 on it. We're just going to do part 1 today. And we're going to look at how you solve something when it's in factored form. So this is called the zero product property. So product, remember, means to multiply. And so what this is saying is if I have two things that are being multiplied together and it equals 0, this is the key, has to equal 0, then I can separate them and write two equations. I can pull them apart and write two equations. Okay, so in this case, remember, factored form looks like this. You have two quantities that you are multiplying together. These parentheses, I'm multiplying with these parentheses. So I can separate them into two equations and set them equal to 0 and then solve for x like you've always solved. Okay, so here's our first one. We want to solve the following. And remember, solve means I want to get x equal to something. That's what solve means. So since I'm multiplying these together, I can separate these and set them equal to 0. And then I'm just going to solve for x. So I'm going to subtract 5. So one answer would be, whoops, x equals negative 5. And then I can add 7. And so x equals 7. And there are my two answers for x. Okay, again, the next one, I'm multiplying and they're equal, it's already equal to 0. So I can separate these apart and set them each equal to 0. And then I can solve. So to solve for x, I would add 9. So x equals 9 would be one answer. And I would add 11 to solve here. X equals 11. So there are your first two. Okay, same thing. We're just following the same idea. These are being multiplied together and it's equal to 0. So I can separate them and set them each equal to 0. And then I'm going to solve. So I'm going to subtract 1. So my first answer would be x equals negative 1. And then I would subtract 6. And so x equals negative 6. Okay, next one, again, they're being multiplied together. It's equal to 0, so I can separate and set equal to 0. And then I'm going to solve. So I'm going to add 5 to both sides. So 2x equals 5. And then I'm going to divide by 2. So x equals, and it doesn't go in evenly, you're going to bring down your fraction as is. You're just going to leave it as 5 over 2, or if you want to write it as 2.5, you can. But we're trying to stay away from decimals. And then here, subtract 6 on both sides, so x equals negative 6. Okay, again, same idea. They're being multiplied together. I'm going to separate them and set them equal to 0. And hopefully you're seeing once you separate them and set them equal to 0, you're just solving like you've always solved for a variable. So 3x equals negative 8. Divide by 3. x equals, if you do that on your calculator, you're going to get 0.3 repeating, which we don't want. So we're going to bring down that fraction as is. If it can't be reduced, you're going to leave it. Now we're going to go over here. We're going to add 13 to both sides. So 4x equals 13. Then we're going to divide both sides by 4. So x equals, if you do that on your calculator, you're going to get a decimal. So we're going to bring it down as is and just leave it. And there are my two answers for x. Okay, same thing here. They're being multiplied together and they're equal to 0. So we're going to separate them and set them equal to 0. And then we're just going to solve for x. So we're going to subtract 14 on both sides. So 2x equals negative 14. Divide by 2. So x equals negative 7. That's one answer. Then we're going to subtract 9 on both sides over here. So 3x equals negative 9. And then we're going to divide by 3. So x equals negative 3. There's my second answer. Okay, now this one looks a little bit different. But the question is, are we still multiplying two quantities together? So is this still being multiplied by all of this? The answer is yes, because they're squeezed. So I'm going to do the same idea. I'm going to still separate them. So I'm going to take 9x and set that equal to 0. And then I'm going to take 6x plus 7 and set it equal to 0. So I'm going to divide by 9. And 0 divided by anything is just 0. And then over here, I'm going to subtract 7 on both sides. So 6x equals negative 7. And then we're going to divide by 6. X equals, that's going to give me a decimal. So I'm going to bring that fraction down as is. And there are my two answers. Okay, so that does it for 10.5. And you now may begin working on your worksheet. If you have any questions, please message me on Canvas.